Hi, everybody. Welcome to 2021 and the first episode of the Atheist Experience. I am Shannon Q. And as we've noted, you've been invaded by Kanakistan. The ACA has been taken over by Canadians for the next hour and a half to 2 hours. So everybody sit tight because I am joined today by Paul from Paulogia. Paul, why don't you say hello to everybody? Oh, you can't hear me. Uh-oh, Paul can't hear me. Paul just wave. Paul can't hear us, evidently. I'm not muted. Whenever I'm on a show, it's rife with sound issues, just so that you know. it's just something that happens when I'm on a show. If it's live, there's going to be sound issues. So we're going to get Paul back in so that he can hear. But while we're waiting for that, I'm going to go into our announcements. First, welcome to 2021, guys. We did it. We made it. It's 2021. And welcome to the Atheist Experience. The Atheist Experience is one of the wonderful shows that is put on by the ACA, which is the Atheist Community of Austin. The Atheist Community of Austin is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization that is dedicated to the promotion of positive atheism and the separation of religion and government. So if you would like to support the ACA, you have a multitude of ways to do so. One of the ways that you can do so is you can go to our merch store, which they're going to put up on the screen. You can go to our merch store and buy some pretty awesome AXP merch. You can also buy merch for all of our other shows. Another way that you can support this channel, as well as the other channels that are affiliated with the ACA, is to go on the button down below where it says join, and you can become a channel member. And if you are a channel member, you will be supporting the ACA and all of the nonprofit work that they do. If you are somebody who is benefiting from this show and you would like to, we also have 2 Facebook groups that you can join. The first Facebook group is a public Facebook group. The second Facebook group, and you can see the link above if you'd like to join. The second is a private fan group. Both of these groups are groups that anybody can join. The private group, if you would like to join privately, as some of us may have to, you won't see, and your public feed won't see anything that you post in this group as it is private. And now I would like to acknowledge our crew. Let's put up the crew cam, please. Look at these guys. These guys are the volunteers that make everything happen. They are the ones working tirelessly behind the scenes to rally people like me, and I'm a nightmare to work with. So just show them some love, guys, because this crew is amazing. Crew Cat, everybody, you guys are the heart of this show, all the other shows, and the ACA, and we can't thank you enough. And I would like to let everybody know also before we get into the show that until January 10th, anything that is donated here during the live stream and anything that is donated through the Facebook campaign, and it's not going to be going to the ACA until January 10th. It is going to be going to Black non-believers. And the ACA is going to be matching your donations 1-for-1 up to $10,000, which is our goal. I could explain what Black non-believers do, but we actually have a special guest who's made a video, Mendisa, who is the person who does Black non-believers, and she is going to give an explanation for you guys. So stay tuned for just one moment and we'll put up her video so that you guys can hear what they're all about.
Hi, everyone. Mandisa Thomas here, asking you to join the Atheist Community of Austin in supporting Black non-believers, also commonly known as BN. In case you are not already familiar with us, Black Non-Believers is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Headquartered in the Atlanta, Georgia area, we connect with other Blacks and allies who are living free of religion by providing a caring, friendly, and informative environment. Instead of accepting dogma, we determine truth and morality through reason and evidence. The mission of Black non-believers is to provide secular fellowship, nurture and support non-believers in coming out, i.e. open identification, promote pride in the atheist and secular identities, and organize members for a variety of events and charitable causes. Black non-believers welcomes all regardless of age, gender identity, sexual identity, national origin, and racial identity. 2021 will mark our 10th year of building community, increasing the representation of the Black non-religious demographic, and advocating for true liberation. And we need you to help us continue and expand on our work. For more information, please visit our website at blacknonbelievers.org. Also, please do follow and subscribe to us on social media at Facebook at Black Nonbelievers, Instagram at B Nonbelievers Inc., Twitter at B Nonbelievers, the B and the N are capitalized, and YouTube at Black Nonbelievers Inc. Finally, we hope that you will join us either in person or online for our major events, including our 10th anniversary celebration, which will take place from January 15th through the 17th in New Orleans. You can register to attend virtually for only $5. And of course, we hope that you will consider a support donation to help make this one of the best hybrid events of the year. We will also be co-hosting the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference in September in Chicago, Illinois, as well as BNCCon, our cruise convention in November, which sails out of Miami, Florida. All safety and social distancing protocols will be followed. So please donate to the link you see below and do continue to support the work of the ACA. Welcome to 2021, and I hope that we all have a great year.
And thanks to Mendiza. So if you guys are looking to support the ACA, this is also another wonderful way to support an additional organization who is doing fantastic work. And if you haven't checked out Black Nonbelievers, please follow Mendiza's advice. Go and do so. They're doing wonderful, wonderful work. And hey, it looks like Paul's acknowledging that I'm saying words. That's exciting. Can you hear me saying things?
Do you hear me saying words?
I can hear you saying words. Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Welcome to the Atheist Experience again. This is your second time, I think, yeah?
It is my second time, yeah. But I'm very excited to be kicking off 2021 in such a great way.
I know. We've completely invaded. The Canadians have taken over. Sorry, guys. We have to start by apologizing. It wouldn't be a Canadian invasion if we didn't apologize for it.
Sorry.
That's what it's all about. So we do have some calls that are already in the queue. Just to let everybody know, we are going to prioritize the theist callers. But before we get into it, Paul, just in case anybody is foolish enough not to know, why don't you tell everybody what you're all about, who you are, and where they can find you?
Sure. Well, my name is Paul, although I sometimes go by Paulogia online, which is the name of my YouTube channel, which is the primary place to find me. I'm a former Christian. About 5 years ago, I left Christianity and found my way to being an atheist. And so I do a lot of counter apologetics on my channel. And if you are interested in that, check it out. And if you're a theist, give us a call today and we can finally chat.
Yes, I know this is the opportunity for all those people who have been challenging you on social media and in your comments section. Today's the day, guys. Today's the day. Give us a call. Challenge him in person so that you can go one-on-one. Are you ready to take some calls, Paul?
I am ready.
Are you strapped in? We're going to start with Tim.
All right.
We're going to get right into it. I'm so psyched. Let's go. Hi, Tim. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. What would you like to talk about today?
So we were part of that Infinity War stream over on non-sect almost 3 years ago. And we got stuck on a reformulation of a question a couple of different times about whether Christianity matches up to the world as it is better than any other worldview. And then you recently did a response to Braxton Hunter's 10 questions for atheists. And I think he was driving at the same question with question one is, hey, how does your atheism better account for the world as we find it than my Christianity does? That was the first time I've run into Braxton's channel, which has been kind of a trip for me the last 48 hours. I've been digging into some of the stuff of his that I hate and some of that I love. So I kind of wanted to dig into that question a little bit about whether that's even, because it's been almost 3 years, and my views have shifted a teensy bit about whether that's even a great way to approach, the question for evidence, whether there is a God or not, and if so, which God. And if it were, I'm not certain how we would formulate and generalize a question in a way where we could all get buy-in to the same formulation of what we're trying to discover there. So I kind of wanted to go into that a little bit.
Okay. Can I reiterate your question just to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly?
Sure.
You're asking, so the question as I understood it from Braxton was, how does atheism account for things that we can see in the world in a way that Christianity doesn't account for? And the point I made, I'll do it a little more succinctly here, was that atheism isn't a worldview. And Braxton, if you're watching this, I know you didn't say that. So atheism doesn't account for anything necessarily just by virtue of being an atheist. You don't formulate a structure, like a philosophy on viewing the world based on atheism. But he asserted, and what I was countering was that Christianity does account for things that we see in the world. But my counter was that you can't make predictive models based around Christianity that give you information about the world. What you can really do, if you're trying hard enough, is kind of retrofit things that we already understand into the text via interpretation. And even that's tenuous at best. Is that the question that you were asking? Like to reiterate that?
Yeah. And so we had danced around at this a few years ago a bit too about about you guys trying to pin down whether you don't think there's a God, because each religion has a different way of accounting for these facts as well, and they're all inconsistent. And trying to get us to kind of offer why we think the Christian God can be proven as the one and only.
Right. And or that there would be any, because I don't think that you can make any predictive models based on religion. At least not reliable predictive models.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of why I'm even wondering if the question is a good one, and that's why I wanted to kind of dig back into that, because I think 3 years ago I would have said that's a very good formulation of the question. Mm-hmm. I'm not certain if I think that coming up with, I don't think I can come up with anything about the natural world as such that Christianity can predict better than a full kind of methodological naturalist worldview of some sort.
Right. And one step further than that is that, of course, there's Occam's razor, and Occam's razor doesn't necessarily say that it's that the simplest answer is the easiest and therefore God. That's not what Occam's razor says. Occam's razor is about multiplying assumptions. And so what Occam's razor wants is that if all things being equal, which answer do you look at that has the fewest assumptions built on top of it? And so if it is a tie to say, oh, materialism explains everything and Christianity explains everything and it's equally well, Christianity assumes a whole lot of things that materialism doesn't assume, because, of course, under Christianity, materialism is a subset of the supernatural, right? So, in my view, if those things come up a tie, then naturalism has to win. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I have a BA in philosophy.
So you could school me, absolutely.
Basically, yeah. So basic logic. I think I brought Occam razor up a couple of times in that stream we had together. So I just wanted to dig with you because I'm bounced this idea off of you guys.
Sure.
I think my response to Braxton and my response to looking back 3 years ago to the me and to the you guys of that previous stream is to say, okay, if we're just looking at trying to predict the world as it is, the physical world, the natural world, the historical facts, all of this, if that's what we're limiting our scope of inquiry to, the who, what, when, where, why, and how, there's a very hard time for me on the who, the what, on the where, the how, which are kind of the things that
right.
history and
So
science and
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tim. I want to make sure I'm following along with you because I think we're repeating things right now. So it seems as though you're agreeing with us that Christianity doesn't really make predictive models and isn't the best way of explaining what we perceive as true in the natural world. But you have an issue with the question. So that's what's interesting to me is you seem to think that that's a bad question. Do you think it's a bad question because there are things that are truths that aren't accounted for by methodological naturalism that you believe could be accounted for by religious, by theology somehow?
Yeah, I think it comes down to what I was trying to conclude that with. There's a whole bunch of why of kind of the moral impetus why questions that a theistic approach to the world at least attempts to answer, whereas I've never seen an atheist, You've
never seen an atheist attempt to understand morality?
Try to attempt to get to the deeper kind of,
What do you mean by deeper, though? This is where we're getting lost in the weeds a little bit, because it seems to me that you're saying to me,
I'm trying not to.
if I'm hearing correct, yeah, it's hard. Like, these are difficult questions to talk about. So it seems to me that you're saying to me that you're acknowledging that saying religion doesn't account for, like, religious texts and theology don't account for things that we perceive in the natural world, but maybe there are things that we don't currently have explanations for in the way of how we engage with each other. Like, because that's what morality would be, right? It would be how we best interact with each other, that you don't think an atheist could speak to without involving God in the answer. Why does God need to be involved in that answer?
Morality, purpose. There's a lot of Christians that are going to get hung up on those why questions. Why am I here? The kind of existential moral and existential personal angst questions.
Right.
I don't know if a naturalistic worldview
you don't think psychology could potentially explain some of those things? Like how to cope with existential angst, or maybe why we have existential angst, and why that's something that we as humans feel as though we need to deal with and look to create models, whether they be true or otherwise, in order to account for, so that we can be more comfortable. You don't think something like that could at least, because if you're going to the why, there's two questions there. There's one, why do we feel this way? And then two, after you which I think is the first one you need to address. And then after we address why do we feel this way, we have to address the cause of what's getting us to feel this way, right? Because you can't identify the cause of what's getting you to feel this way until you identify like that you have some sort of feeling, or I could have been doing that backwards, but either way, there's two components there. And I feel as though from a naturalistic perspective, maybe you could explain it by looking at, our neuroanatomy. I like neuroanatomy and psychology. So we could explain why some people feel as though they have these types of anxieties that they need reconciliation for. And that in itself would explain religion to a certain degree to me, because creating models that alleviate that angst would be something that we would be driven to do. So that makes sense to me, as opposed to trying to do it backwards and saying we have existential angst because there is a God. We feel existential angst and maybe therefore constructed one in order to alleviate it. I don't know. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I mean, I guess I would ask you, I guess, do you think that there is such a thing as objective morality or objective purpose? And when I say objective, I mean that is absent a mind. So, like, if we take all the minds out of the universe, is there such a thing as morality? That seems like a weird concept to me, that morality to me is how sentient beings want or should interact with each other in order to achieve certain goals. Generally, because of biology, our goals are survival, avoidance of pain, and maximizing pleasure and well-being. When you look at those three goals, which are very biologically driven, it's very easy to explain why, hey, I don't like it when stuff is stolen from me, So maybe I can just imagine that you don't like it when stuff is stolen from you, and maybe we all do better when we don't steal stuff. Like, that doesn't really need anything ontologically bigger than those biological needs. Same with purpose. Someone would have to demonstrate to me that there was such a thing as a single purpose that somehow absent minds, exists. There's no evidence in the universe that says that the universe even cares that we're here, let alone that there is some single idea. Would you agree with? Do you think that there is such thing as objective morality and objective purpose in those senses?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, that's really, having done what I've done, those are both very hard questions where I could come down on either side. I think that if there is an objective morality, it means nothing if there are no minds, and so.
Right, and also doesn't that kind of terminate the Euthyphro dilemma too if you're grounding it in God?
The way we're going to discover whatever the best moral thing to do is to treat it like we're having this discussion over subjective goals.
Right.
Like, and so the objective question is kind of superfluous to me on that. And so I'm kind of stuck in a kind of a weird spot when I look at these questions, because I'm looking at these questions, I'm trying to come up with these things, and I'm like, there's something niggling in the back of my head about the questions, and then there's still my personal religious experience. But those are the big things. It's like, okay, those are those unanswered questions that I haven't fully sorted yet, and my personal religious experience are the two things that convince me God exists. And I kind of just want to suspend for a moment. My reaction to this kind of confluence of circumstances is I kind of want to stop questioning each other's motives and each other's approaches and each other's reconciliation of the worldview. I just want to dig down on what we agree on and try to start making the world a better place.
Right.
Yeah. I agree with that. Sorry, I keep almost interrupting you. A, because of the lag, and B, because I'm excited. So I apologize, Tim. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. But I was like, maybe if you're looking to have the perspective of somebody like me, I could give you my reasons, maybe why I don't see it having a theistic grounding as a good idea. So first off, I feel like it all terminates at the Euthyphro dilemma, right? Like, is something moral because is it moral because God says it's moral, or is I'm gonna get it wrong because I'm not very good at philosophy, but is something moral because God says it, or does God say it because it's moral? That's where it terminates to me, is that the Euthyphro dilemma. And when we're having practical discussions about how we should engage with each other in the world, I don't feel as though what we should be measuring, or what is the best way to measure what is moral in any practical standpoint. And I don't even believe morality as an objective standard is a thing. I think it's just a system of behavioral standards that we strive to feel as though are the best fit for us to flourish within society. And when we're having these discussions, and you're referencing God, you're instantly in the realm of them being prescriptive. And once they're prescriptive, we can no longer deviate from them if that is in fact the case. We can't even debate them. We just have to follow them. The very fact that they are up for debate and we can measure them against standards that we choose, knowing what's best for us by analyzing them, knowing what's best for how we interact with one another, by seeing how societies have existed over time and seeing what did or didn't take. Those are the really important ways to have these discussions, not whether or not it's grounded in God, but what it should look like. And if you're having a conversation about what it should look like and you're holding it up against these types of historical standards and behavioral standards and psychological standards and sociological standards, you're already out of the realm of this prescriptivist view that says it's moral because God says it is, because we don't have access to that, right? If God says it's moral and it's not in the Bible, because I don't think you could really reference the Bible and be like, that's where morality comes from, because then you're going to have to start cherry picking, and we're right back to it being subjective choices that we're making about what is or isn't best. So you're already existing outside of that by operating day to day. So the next step is just an acknowledgement that he's not necessary for morals. I don't even think you have to disbelieve in him for that, but you have to admit, when you look at it from that perspective, he doesn't factor in as necessary.
Yeah, and like, this is why I subscribe to your channel and Paul, as well as to places on the other side that are more aligned with mine or more conservative in their theology than mine. It's like, I'm looking at this entire debate and I'm saying, okay, and my perspective has very much become, I can't escape the kind of the kind of flat reality that I'm convinced that God exists based upon my personal experience, based upon the fact that I'm going to keep on digging on these questions because that's who I am and that's what I've always done. But I'm almost convinced that I'm going to end up, leaving this earth whenever I do, still believing there's a God. But how does this? But I don't want to then make that in my interactions with either other believers of other faiths or with non-believers such a big freaking deal. It's like, I'm going to come at this religious text of mine and as a gay evangelical Christian, and I'm going to say, okay, well, I know the God I've experienced, I know what's going on, but I can't impose this on other people because look at all these discussions we've had, and we come out at a point where we're down to personal experience and unanswered questions, and unanswered questions eventually become answered somehow.
Right, and Tim, I would also encourage you,
we may never get to them ourselves.
A lot of these things about like purpose and morality, all these things, essentially, when I've had these conversations in the past, they come down to, when you've had them for an hour and you continue out, it comes down to, well, how do you explain this intuition that I have, or intuition that I know that a bunch of us have? And intuition, I think you would agree, is not a way of knowing things, right? And so if you have an intuition...
It's not a way of knowing things we can use to make claims on.
Right, I mean, exactly.
I think it's something that we sometimes can't escape internally, but we can't use it as part of a logical proof.
Right. So if we all intuit that there's maybe some moral oughts, an intuit that there's a moral ought is not the same as demonstrating there's a moral ought, or an intuit that there's a purpose for me that is outside of myself is not the same as demonstrating there's a purpose for me outside of myself, right? So, for someone like me, I don't, someone says to you, how do you explain my intuition? Then I listen to someone like Shannon, who explains the neuroscience and the psychology behind, because we've evolved this way, because the chemicals work this way, and she can explain it way far better than I.
That's exactly what I would have said, because the chemicals work this way.
Exactly.
Verbatim.
Yeah. Yes. Anyway, does that help at all, Tim?
I think it does. I think I wanted to bounce us off of a couple that I knew were intelligent, who sit on the other side, but I thought would have this kind of constructive
conversation. Sorry they're not here today.
I think my response
too bad. Sorry, it's us today.
Now is, okay, let's stop talking about these types of, at least from my perspective. I'll continue in the conversation broadly, but I think my rejoinder now, at least internally, is, okay, I'm going to believe what I believe, and I'm going to keep on digging, but let's stop. I'm not going to be quite as tolerant of the kind of broadside from either side of ridicule or anger or disbelief about people believing what they believe. And I'm just going to say, okay, let's get to the actual question at hand about how we make the world a better place and how we move forward in doing these things. It almost feels, freeing in some way, like, okay, I'm not going to escape some of these core questions until I dig more. And maybe at some point we'll have a third conversation a few months or a few years from now, and we'll dig further. But I'm where I'm at now. And I think you guys have been very, very helpful in kind of digging into, from your perspective, helping me refine and hone where my next set of questions are as far as this conversation goes. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim.
I appreciate you calling. We are going to let you go because we have a lot of people have called in. So thank you, Tim. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll see you later. Thanks for calling. Bye.
You too.
I remember him. He was nice before. I'm glad he called back. It's always nice to talk to people who are like respectful in engagement and are actually interested in like having a back and forth and not just saying, not just yelling slavery stuff at me. Oh, probably. I just jinxed us.
And to catch up over time. It's nice. I think all of us, our ideas evolve over time, and hopefully we're getting better.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Are you ready for another one?
I'm ready.
All right. We're going to talk to Brian. We're going to talk to Brian. Let's see if I can answer Brian. I don't know who let me run the controls. It was probably a mistake. Hi, Brian. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. What would you like to talk about today?
Hey, guys. Are you talking to the Brian from Maryland?
I'm talking to you. If you are, in fact, the Brian from Maryland, I didn't really look at the call screening. Oh. Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, guys, this is my first time calling. I'm a little nervous. I have anxiety, but I'm going to try to get through it as best I can. I kind of wrote some stuff down here. But just a little background. I am I guess I could label myself as an agnostic theist, but I've heard people say that, I don't know, no, never mind.
Shannon and I aren't big on labels, so we care more about what you believe, and labels aren't that important.
Yeah, we're not going to berate you because you didn't choose what we perceive as the right label for yourself. Just describe what your beliefs are, and we'll go from there. That's a more productive way for us to chat.
Okay, cool.
Don't be nervous.
Right. Yeah, so yeah, right, yeah. So I was raised in Christianity, more so non-denominational Christianity. I wasn't raised Baptist or Episcopal or anything like that. And there was the main thing that was talked about every Sunday was God's grace, his salvation, and stuff like that. Not really, the Old Testament wasn't really brought up much. It was here and there, but basically, I just wanted to call you guys. I've been wanting to call you guys for a fairly long time, and I've done some research about secular morality, and I called Recovering from Religion, and I had a good talk with the gentleman there. I'm just questioning my beliefs, and I'm 23 years old. I've been a Christian for a while. I won't say that I'm completely an atheist just yet. I'm still an agnostic theist. But
that happens.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just said that happens. So is there something specific? Because we don't have a great deal of time, and I want to make sure that I'm focused enough on what's important to you. So is there something specific that you'd like to address with us or go over with us with regard to your deconversion and something you're struggling with?
Yeah. So my first question is, how can any human prove that science is reliable? I mean, I know that Matt has said that science is proved through its demonstration through reality and stuff like that, which I can understand. But there's some things that I just don't know. I just don't understand how some scientific claims and theories and consensuses can be reliable.
Okay, Paul, did you want to go first? Sure. So first of all, of course, science is grounded on a few things that we are having to assume. For example, we assume that the natural world exists. We assume that that we can learn things about the universe, that it operates in such a way. But those are the very few assumptions that we have to make. And so if you want to talk to someone who wants to insist that the universe doesn't exist and that we can't learn things about it, well, then you're kind of done. But what science really does well, so truth is the extent to which a proposition conforms to reality. That's a thing people rattle off. But I always add on the end, as adjudicated by predictive power, because of course, how well does one conform to reality? Maybe my eyes are failing me and I don't understand that the wall behind me is blue instead of pink or whatever. So what we use is predictive power, and predictive power is the sole scorecard. So in order in science for something to be considered reliable, and we don't use the word proof in science, we use the other words like we're confident. It's by making a prediction. Right. So if I see a door in front of me, I don't just say, there's obviously a door. If I see a door in front of me, I predict, I should be able to open it. I should be able to walk through it. If I use other mechanisms, and if any of those fail, then my proposition that there's a door in front of me, even if I'm seeing it, becomes less reliable, right? So really, and we covered this a little bit with the previous caller, it's all about predictive power, making unique predictions of future data. And this can even be done with history. It can be done with forensic science, for example. Like you might say, okay, we have suspect X, and if it is suspect X, we expect to find these other bits of evidence. And for example, you might be able to find evidence of where they were, or you might be able to find evidence that they had a certain sized shoe. Like even when we're looking backwards, we make predictions. So that is largely how science is. That's the scorecard for science. How well does it predict future data? Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah. Because I have this hard time distinguishing whether science is the confirmation of absolute certainty, or whether it's just the best assumption, or the best how can I say this? The best I don't know. Kind of like
science doesn't, as I mentioned, science doesn't deal in certainties at all, because there's always new data to be learned. Science deals in what is the best current explanation for the phenomena that we've seen so far. And so proof is limited to mathematics. Really, outside of mathematics, we really shouldn't almost use the word, in a philosophical sense. So if you're looking for absolute certainty, no scientist would claim that, even for what we call the laws of science, right? The laws of the universe, we just label those as things for which we've never observed anything different yet. We even leave that open, right? So if I drop my pen 10,000 times, we assume the 10,000 at first will work, but we don't say that we've proven that in advance.
Right. It's essentially the most robust philosophical model that we currently have for testing predictions about reality. I mean, maybe maybe one day somebody will have a better one, but nobody's come up with a better one yet. But I'm not sure where that factors into your theism, which is interesting to me, or the complex relationship that you have with a potential deconversion from theism. So may I ask why you had the question about science?
Yes. So I don't know. I know Matt Dillahunty. He's hung up on. Well, it was years ago, but he hung up on a guy who claimed to be a solipsist. But I don't know what solipsism means. I don't want to think that I'm a solipsist, but the thing is, like, I don't think that I'm going crazy or insane, but I'm literally doubting every single thing, not just my beliefs and faith, but I'm doubting the reliability of science, astronomical physics, stuff like that.
Do you think that one of the reasons that you might be doing something like that, Brian, is because you've realized that you held a belief structure over time that you held without necessarily seeking hard proof, and now you realize that belief structure itself had a falsification criteria that it didn't meet for you, and because it didn't meet that falsification criteria for you, you have concerns now that wherever you land is going to create the same problem for you. So now you're seeking certainty as a solution to that problem.
Right. Yeah, that's basically what it is. Yeah, I would say so.
Brian, so many of us go through that.
I was there.
So many of us go through that. Like when you realize that, first off, I just want to acknowledge to you that you are not alone in this. You are not going crazy. This is a normal thing that happens when people go through the deconversion process, or even go out of one religion into another. Sometimes you realize that you had believed something maybe for not the best of ideas, and you don't ever want that to happen to you again. So you become laser focused on making sure that the next thing that you believe or whatever you reconstruct is absolutely correct. But then you can go down, especially if you're smart, and especially if you're somebody who is focused on finding the truth, you drill right down to the philosophical baseline, and then you get to, well, can we ever be certain about anything? And that can cause you to have angst, because, well, then what can I be certain about? But you're focusing down so far right now that you're getting to the core philosophy of how we even adjudicate what we find to be true in the world. So a better question to maybe ask yourself, instead of can I be certain about anything at all, would be, how can I best function? Like what can I do in my life so that I have the best facts available to me in order to function appropriately in the world? Because you need to take care of yourself, right? So maybe don't get caught at the philosophical baseline of, well, now how can I know anything? Because there are certain ways that you can know things with a high enough degree of confidence that you can land in the presuppositional space with it. Like the universe exists, that you exist, for example. These are things that you can know with confidence, or at least you can affirm confidently. So I don't know if that helps at all, but I hope it does help to know that you are not the only one, that this happens to so many of us. Does it seem like I understand you? I didn't want to misinterpret you.
Oh no, it sounded like you understood me pretty good, and everything you said was pretty spot on, and that helped pretty good.
Oh, good. I'm glad I could help.
So yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. So do you guys have time for another question, or?
I think so. Yeah. If I don't know about Paul, but who cares anyway? I'm pulling rank. Go ahead, Brian. One more question, then we'll have to let you go. Sure.
Okay. So this is about secular morality. I could never really get any information about secular morality. I've tried watching Matt talk about it, but I couldn't understand it. And the thing is, I find myself still labeling myself as a Christian because I find myself believing, well, first off, I do agree that God isn't a moral God.
Right.
But the thing, like with slavery and, the flooding of the earth, killing those millions of people, that was by all means immoral. But the thing is, I don't understand why. But the New Testament morals that Christ promoted, and his sacrifice and him dying on the cross for humanity, that just, I don't understand how that is less superior or inferior to secular morality. And I've heard people say, well, secular morality and the morality that Christ promoted are on the same lines. I've heard that before, but I still don't know how it's possible.
Would you agree, Brian, that Jesus' morality teachings can be summed up with the two commandments that he professed? So the first being, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And the second, he said, the second was like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Would you agree that that kind of sums up Christian morality in the New Testament?
I mean, I would say so, yeah.
I mean, that's how Jesus summarized it. That's what he said if it comes down to these. Now, the first one, love your neighbor, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. That's the one that atheists don't use, or secular people don't use.
We leave that one out.
And so what we focus on, and now we didn't get to it via Christianity, this golden rule, this idea of empathy existed. Confucius talked about it hundreds of years before Jesus existed. It existed as far as we know forever. Love your neighbor as yourself, and it would be better phrased as love your neighbor as they would choose to be loved. Would you agree that pretty much anything, can you think of anything in your moral system that wouldn't fall under that category and also couldn't then be attributed to mere just empathy?
Right. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So the trouble is that Christians get in trouble when they use that first one. When it's the love the Lord your God ahead of empathy, that's actually when some of the problems come in, because then we decide, oh, certain behaviors, if I'm interpreting the Bible right, God doesn't want me to do certain behaviors, even though that might hurt people. So I'm going to use that to override. Or, maybe I need to fly a plane into a building. Like all these things the problems come with that first one. So if we stick to the second one, we have a secular morality, and frankly, a morality that intuitive, and I like to use the word intuition, but it's what Christians tend to do when they cherry pick the Bible, is they tend to just focus on that second commandment. So if you just take the first one away, we kind of all agree on great ways for us to thrive in a society. That's basically the essence of secular morality.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Paul. And I hadn't thought about it before, is that most monotheistic religions, their systems of morality insist that we prioritize God over each other. And that causes a lot of problems. So when you remove him, that leaves us prioritizing each other. And us prioritizing each other clearly doesn't require a God. We can understand through how we've interacted over time, how we operate in societies that are mutually beneficial, and that being good to each other and doing things that benefit each other and us as a group as a whole, that help protect our species, help us individually flourish, help us be happier, help us have more productive societies. All of those things you can kind of look at sort of empirically and understand that there's outcomes related to certain ways of behaving towards one another. And if you can understand that there's outcomes that you would measure as positive, whereas there's also outcomes you would measure as negative, and then attach those to how we interact with one another, then bingo bango, you got a moral system, no God required.
Yeah.
Does that seem problematic to you somewhere?
Would it be problematic to me?
Yeah. Do you see a problem with the Paul or my descriptions there somewhere that you would have an objection to that requires the injection of a deity?
No, I don't necessarily think that we need a God for a moral system, but well, no, hold on. Yeah, that okay. Yep, you got me.
Yep.
Right?
We'll leave you to think.
So I don't know. I'm just searching, and I'm just trying to figure all this out. But I really appreciate you taking my call.
Well, I appreciate you searching with us, Brian. I'm glad that you felt comfortable enough to call and go over this with us and hear us out as well. So we appreciate talking to you, and thank you very much. Feel free to call back and let us know where you stand later on, okay?
All right, cool. That sounds good. See you guys.
Thanks, Brian. We appreciate you. See you later. That was 2 lovely calls in a row. Like, I hope I'm not jinxing us. Are you ready for the next one?
Let's go. We're going to keep going until someone's mean. Is that what you want?
We're going to talk to Enoch next. Hi, Enoch. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. What would you like to talk about today? Hi.
Hi. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
My question is about. Thank you. My question is based about what's called words of knowledge. So, I'm a Christian. It's described in the Bible as something when you tell somebody something about themselves that supposedly that God gave you to tell them that you shouldn't have been able to know. So I have an example. I went to Bible school after high school, and so one of my teachers told me the story, a couple of them actually. There was a church service, and, God put it on somebody's heart to tell some lady that God says, I hate mommies and daddies. And at first he's like, I'm not saying that. That's ridiculous. But then he felt it so strongly that he goes up to the lady and he tells her, hey, I feel like the Lord wants me to tell you that God says, I hate mommies and daddies. And she starts crying and weeping, and so he has no idea why that was so meaningful. And so then she tells him, she's like, when I was a little kid, my father would sexually abuse me, and every time he did, he would say, we're going to play mommies and daddies when he would do that. And so it was things like that, scenarios like that, where it seems like that should be impossible if there's no higher being telling people, giving people messages or anything. I don't know. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Paul, do you want to go first before
you start?
Okay. So, what do you think is more probable, Enoch, that somebody told you a thing while you were in Bible school that they remembered as being prophetic, and that because you were in Bible school yourself and ascribed to the same belief system or looking for affirmation that you believed it, or that somebody walked up to a person and said a random thing and it just happened to have an affiliation with a memory that they had. And because it had an affiliation with a memory that they had, they attributed that as a revelation because of the environment that they were in and them also seeking affirmation. What do you think?
Well, it seems unlikely that they would give that message just randomly, like because it's so contrary to like what seems like common sense. Like, why would you tell someone, God says he hates mommies and daddies? I mean, it sounds horrible. So it's like,
right. And your professor told you this?
Say that randomly.
Your Christian professor at Christian school told you this story. So I have doubts about the story. Just from jump, I have doubts about the story because people tell all kinds of anecdotes. So I'm not sure why I should be compelled to believe the story to begin with. But even if I did believe the story, let's say I'll grant you the benefit of the doubt and I'll believe the story just for the sake of this conversation. Whether or not it's counterintuitive to say something to somebody doesn't mean that what I said doesn't hold. If it really did happen that they feel compelled to say something counterintuitive to another person, it still holds that regardless of what they said, that person in the environment that they were in from a psychological standpoint, if they were in a church, around a church congregation, used to people getting prophetic sort of messages delivered to them, and also looking for affirmation or perhaps in some mental anguish and looking for an opportunity to talk to somebody that they trust in an environment where they feel as though they can alleviate that, would make that affiliation. So it's far more likely to me, even believing your story, that somebody walked up to someone and said something counterintuitive and then that person ascribed it a meaning, not that it had one before that person said it. And also I would ask, why would God want somebody to walk up to another human being and elicit a memory of sexual abuse? Why would that be the choice of message?
Well, because by saying that, he was showing that person that God knew their hurt and cared about them.
Well, if God was there, God would have been there when they were being sexually abused. So God chooses weird things to do. I watched all of your sexual abuse, and now many, many, many years later, I'm going to get a random dude in a church to walk up to you and say a random assortment of words that you can now mentally affiliate with that sexual abuse so that you can remember it again. Neat, God. Good call.
When I was a Christian, I had many experiences just like that. So both on both sides. So when I was in youth ministry, I would deal with teenagers and young people, and I could feel God telling me, go talk to that person and ask them about their home life. And I would go and ask them about their home life. What's the biggest problem kids usually have? Home life is usually in the top one or two. Probably I went up to people and asked them about their home life in the past and then went to the second question. And I've had conversations with some of these people now a decade or more later and said, what did that experience mean to you? And they, of course, filled in the gaps that was super meaningful because they were having a specific hard time and they remembered it differently, as if I'd asked them specifically about, say, their sister or their mom and their dad, when really what I said was, how are things at home? And more examples. At one point, my church was doing a fundraising drive to get rid of their debt for a certain year. And I had run in because I wasn't able to really come to the service. And I handed our treasurer a check. And he said, "You're kidding me. This is the exact amount that we need to clear the debt." Fine. So this was a big answer to prayer that I'd done this. But then it turns out later in the evening, a bunch of other people also gave money. So it really didn't matter that my check happened to be the one that rounded it off. But yet I remember the whole congregation, this was the big miracle. Paul came in and gave the check with the exact amount that was needed. We just tend to find patterns in a lot of these things. I've had people call me and said, "God laid it on my heart to pray for you. Is there something wrong with you?" Well, sure enough, I was sick that day. but there could have been 9 other things that were wrong with me. And yet God laying on their heart is really sometimes just sometimes our subconscious picks up on cues, social cues, other cues that we're not necessarily aware of, and we act on those. So in retrospect, when I've had those experiences, exactly like you just said, I've now come to realize that there are other factors for which I can't necessarily account for. And that's part of what, not only is it like if the anecdote was wrong, because I know these were things that happened to me, because I do agree completely with Shannon, anecdotes are not great. But what we attribute things to isn't really proof of anything. It's just what we're attributing to something in the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I see where you're coming from. If I could, one short question, separate, but like just short, if that's okay. If Christianity was true, I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I was just affirming. Go ahead. That's it.
Oh, okay. If Christianity was true, would you believe it?
Yep.
If it was true, if something was true, would I believe that it's true? It's a tautological question, right? If I knew it was true, would I believe it was true? If I knew it, sure. But I don't believe it's true, so it's not a problem for me.
Right. It's just like a philosophical.
Yeah, that's a Frank Turek question that we get all the time.
Yeah.
If atheism was true, would you believe? Like it's just a weird thing. Like you can say if X was true, would you believe X? I mean, probably if someone could demonstrate that it was true to you, and you were able to rationally get there, then sure, you would believe it. But when people ask these questions, I think what they're attempting to do is say, hey, I know it's true. Maybe I know something different than you. I mean, I don't understand necessarily the point of
it's supposed to be a motivational gotcha, right? Like, oh, if you just don't want it to be true, and that's
right, or you don't know the truth,
right? But again, they wanted to demonstrate, like, you wouldn't even accept God, even if I could demonstrate it, is something that gets thrown at me all the time. And
because then they can excuse away why we think the way that we think, because we're just irrational, or we're hiding the truth from ourselves, or we don't want to acknowledge it.
And I have seen atheists answer no to that question. It's like, no, if I wouldn't believe in God, even if it was demonstrated accurately, and that's too bad. I feel sorry for such people, and I know that they exist, but I'm not one of them.
A totally separate question, though, too. Most people most people I've seen would say, yes, if it was true, I would believe it was true. Of course, it was demonstrated to me in a sufficient enough fashion that I believed it. Obviously, once I believe it's true, I'll believe it. That's just the way it works. But most people that I've seen would say, the question then becomes, would I worship that God? And I've seen many people say no to that question. And I struggle with that question too, because would I worship that God? He's not very good. And if I did worship it, would it be solely for self-preservation and selfish reasons, which I think would get to the source of why there might be some faith anyway. It's like a form of self-preservation, a way of kind of retaining yourself for eternity. And then is that a good motivation to believe? Then I get in this spiral about like, if I did worship him, why would I worship him? Would I worship him because he was good and I should worship him? Because I don't think so, based on what I know about the Christian God, at least being proposed. Or would I worship him because of what I know of him? I know that if I didn't, he would harshly punish me. So I would need to worship him in order to protect myself. And if so, then I get to those.
And my answer to that question is always, it depends on which hell is real.
Yeah, that's right. Like if you're poofed, if you're poofed, then I don't need to. No.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to exist forever anyway. Who wants to exist could you imagine? We can't even contemplate eternity. What would that look like?
We're now having a conversation without Enoch.
Yeah, anyway, hi Enoch. Thanks for the call. We're going to let you go.
That's okay.
Is Enoch still here? Sorry, bye. Anyway, thank you for the questions and have a good day. See you later. Bye, guys.
Yep.
All right. You're welcome.
We do that.
That's what happens when we do that sometimes. Yeah. This is what it's like when Paul and I are together anywhere, in any room, at any point in time. Okay, cool. So we are going to talk to Kevin. You ready for Kevin?
Let's go, Kev.
Kevin.
I assume Kev is okay.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey,
Welcome to the Atheist Experience.
hey,
What would
thanks
you
for
like to
taking
talk
my
about
call,
today?
guys.
No problem. What would you like to chat about?
Hey, I'd like to talk about nature and my claim that it has deterministic aspects to it.
Okay.
Cool. To further explain that, maybe from a philosophical perspective, but
okay.
Basically what I was trying to say is the reason why nature has a deterministic aspect to it is because I believe that there is a consciousness, an overlaying consciousness that regulates the universe.
So you're like a pantheist or a pantheist? Is that what you would be?
Well, I'm a theist. I'm more of a Christian, falling under the monotheist category. But
how do you comport that? Okay, now I have questions, because how do you comport a monotheistic perspective of God, and the Christian God especially, with him simultaneously being consciousness and every atomic particle of the universe having some form of consciousness? Because then wouldn't we all simultaneously be God through the constitution of our material affect, because every component of us is God's consciousness?
And isn't that the opposite of determinism? That's the opposite of what I think of. I'm a determinist.
Right.
So I don't know if we're on the same page, Kevin.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with this, because it is a seemingly kind of overplayed saying that humans are made in the image of God, but our consciousness is an example of that. And I'm
how so? Then God, oh my gosh, you totally picked the wrong day if you want to talk about consciousness, dude. Like, how is our consciousness an example of godliness? For real, though.
Well, it has to do with something that I was close to agreeing with you guys on about. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to straw man, but
okay.
It was an idea that I was close to agreeing with, that humans are kind of like animals in the respect that we have to go through living through the pressures of everyday living. But human
I mean, we are animals.
I'm sorry?
We are animals.
The reason why I kind of turned away from that and didn't exactly agree with that is because while just like the human has to react to everyday living just like the animal, we're able to, our consciousness is proof that we can override that.
Override what? What do you mean override what?
Well, I kind of skipped around a little bit, because I'm sorry to say this. I kind of skipped around it because I was trying to say that the universe has a symbiotic.
We are. You were like, I'm okay. Whoa, we're like all over the place. We are what? So far, what I've gotten from this, so I don't think we're communicating well, is that the universe is consciousness, but you're a Christian, and that all aspects of the universe have consciousness through God, because God's consciousness is everything, but also it's a symbiotic relationship. Humans aren't animals. And the reason that we aren't animals is because we have consciousness that apparently can override something. So we need to focus on one. Where do you think is the best way to start? Because like I could address any one of these, but like where do you want to start? that's too much all over the place, Kevin. Let's hone in on one. Where would you like to begin?
I agree. It's just that when I'm trying to study the universe, and what this all boils down to is, does the universe have a nurturing or a volatile aspect to it?
The universe does not care about us.
The reason why I come to the reason why I come to God is because I believe that single consciousness was needed in order for life to come out of the volatile nature of the universe. You know what I mean?
No.
Now, for example,
Why? I don't know what you mean. Why? What do you mean?
Like if anything complex tried to exist on the first 4 or 5 million years of Earth, it would have already died. But at some point, it had.
I already hold issue with the tried to exist. So what you're saying is, I'm gonna see if I can drill down and reformulate what you're saying so that I can understand it. Is that because the universe itself was hostile to life, or at least what we know of it in our little corner here, what we know about, the formulation of our sun and the earth, the environment was hostile to life for billions of years, so life couldn't have formed. And there's only a brief moment where life could have formed, and then it did. And that's evidence of like consciousness.
Yes.
Of consciousness
something like that,
creating the universe in order to get life billions of years later when the circumstances allowed for it anyway.
Yes, it was something like that, but I've also been proposed with the question that, well, if the universe is so big, then why do you need a God? Because we're so small compared to the rest of the universe. But
okay. Now we're on another tangent again, though. I think
stopped and agreed with that. I would have stopped and agreed with that, except when we look out into the universe, it's an example of how we cannot even obtain those heights unless we become spiritual beings. For example,
okay, you are like you have not. But you are. I do not know how you're making these connections. Like I can't see it. I don't understand how you are logically or even mentally making the connection with the universe is incredibly expansive. And we are just one teeny tiny little microscopic component of it when we put it into perspective. Thus, there could be life elsewhere. We just wouldn't know or may never know. Therefore, we need a God with consciousness. Make the connection for me. Connect those dots for me.
Our consciousness, our consciousness compared to the animal is different.
Our consciousness?
That we don't.
Are we back to us?
Yes.
But we were just talking about the entirety of the. Okay, so we're back to our consciousness. So, okay. So we're outside of the one sec. So we started with how could life begin, and thus it needed consciousness, and then we got away from that, and then we got to there could be life elsewhere, so we needed consciousness. Then we got away from that, and now we're back to our consciousness. So because our consciousness differs from what we perceive as consciousness in other animals, qualitatively, that means
the
God, because you would have to really define aspects of consciousness. Because can you demonstrate to me unequivocally that a whale that utilizes language or another great ape that utilizes sign language to even communicate with us effectively and can demonstrate foreknowledge and fear, and that we know feels emotions, and that has a brain anatomical structure in their brain that's similar to ours and demonstrates problem-solving behaviors and things like that, that they don't experience conscious in the same way that we do on some level? Because essentially what you're saying is, I know humans are conscious because I'm conscious and I'm a human. We're able to articulate ideas to each other. So I perceive us as superior as a result of what I would say is intellect and conscious being married in this argument. And thus we deviate from animal species and are exceptionally special. And the only way to account for our specialness is that we were made by someone special who wanted us to be special too. But then you're also ignoring that there are many, many other animals who have what we would easily describe as consciousness, maybe not self-awareness and language in the same way that we have, if those are the things that you're talking about, but would definitely count as being conscious, especially if we go back to the beginning of your argument where everything is essentially resonating with consciousness because everything is God and God is consciousness. So like your argument seems self-refuting all over the place. We're like everywhere.
Well, we're only different in the aspect that human consciousness doesn't need a symbiotic relationship.
Okay, so if the height of consciousness on Earth, if worms were the most sophisticated thinkers on Earth, would you be okay with naturalistic explanations up to that point? If worms were the best thinkers.
Well, we actually don't give much credit because the brain of an earthworm is
I know. Shannon was saying that earthworms definitely have a level of consciousness. There is something that is to be like a worm. There is. We maybe can't experiencing, but you seem to be really focusing on this gap between humans and other animals. But you also seem to be bad-mouthing naturalistic explanations in other areas. So I'm just trying to find out exactly what is the most important to you. So if worms were the highest level thinkers on Earth, are you okay that naturalistic explanations can explain everything up to worms?
That all depends on the extent of what these worms could do.
No, they can't do anything different than today. They're just worms.
Well, then no, not at all. Then
okay, so then that consciousness isn't the most important thing to you about the evidence for God. There's something else prior to that.
Because it's much deeper than that, because our consciousness actually gives us the ability to express according to the pressures of the body, having overridden
but you would agree, right, that
of everyday living that we go through.
If you're a Christian, up until day 5.5, there were no humans, right?
That gets into another thing. I don't agree with the...
Well, whatever you count as a day, even if you think a day is a billion years, like whatever, like in terms of whatever you think a day means, the Bible describes periods of time. And there were periods of time, even in the Bible, prior to humans.
Even with time, I can safely say that we don't know exactly the age.
But you don't... you don't think that naturalistic explanations work up to a worm, and so then I just don't see how consciousness is your main argument. You're just throwing stuff against the wall as best we can tell to see what sticks.
Yeah, and at what part in our evolutionary history, if you believe in evolution, because it sounds like you believe in deep time, would we have? What iteration of us did God go? That's the one. That's the one. That's the one that gets the special consciousness. Today's the day. Every iteration of evolution for the last billions of years before that, those weren't special. We just needed them to get here, and then at some point, some iteration just became special and got the special consciousness that does whatever it is that makes God the reason that we need it.
I mean, looking at the universe, there was 3 positions that I began with. That the universe is either volatile, indifferent, or nurturing, and it just seemed like it was simply unfriendly to life. But under those extreme circumstances, we've seen life pop up here and there. And
you just said we can't know certain things. So how in the world are you getting to the universe was hostile to life? How in the world are you getting there?
Because things in the conditions that life had to arise, it had to have been just what it needed to arrive. You know,
but you don't have the purview of the entire universe, though. And Kevin, we've got all the way from the beginning of time to us existing now, and I still don't feel like we keep bouncing back and forth. So and there are other callers waiting in the queue, and we've only got about 15 minutes left. So I am going to let you go now, Kevin. But feel free to call back, maybe listen back to this and see if we can hone in on any one of those 35 to 40 things that you brought up in rapid succession, going back and forth, and we can examine one of them more clearly, maybe, and that might be a more productive way to chat. But I do appreciate you calling, and thank you, and have a good rest of your weekend. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye. All right. We probably have time for at least one more, Paul.
All right.
You want to talk to Joe? Joe's in Canada. We have to take the Canadian caller.
Woo.
Welcome to the Canada Hour, Joe.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different time zone. I think it's 6:45 right now. So
you're aware that Canada has multiple time zones, right?
And Paul and I are in two different ones.
Yeah, I know. Different than you guys, I think, right now. I think we're 1 hour ahead of you guys right now.
We're in different time zones, but that doesn't matter.
It's 7:45 p.m. here for the record. I'm in Nova Scotia. But yeah, go ahead.
We're good.
Oh, 7:45. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm in Ontario right now, so that's why it's like an hour ago.
We won't hold that against you. That's fine. Go right ahead.
Hoping you guys are having a good year. Happy New Year, basically.
Thank you.
So I think I just wanted to talk about one thing about just mocking religions. I think on the call screen there, I just submitted it. It's just about, I mentioned drawing Prophet Muhammad, drawing sexualized images of Hindu gods, and just other behaviors that mock religion. And I was hoping we can have a discussion around that, because I noticed a lot of atheists, they do sometimes mock religions and, say it is, meant to offend and meant to be as free speech. And I was wondering why that is.
Okay.
Can we talk about that? Is that okay?
Yeah, no, I think it's a valid thing to discuss. So when it comes to the drawings of Prophet Muhammad and sexualized drawings of Hindu gods, I think there's a specific point that's being made that maybe us in, over in North America don't relate to as much, because we have a bit of privilege here in the way that we have freedom of religion and freedom from religion, so that we're not subject to persecution for blaspheming. Now, there are other parts of the world where people are jailed or killed or have aspects of their lives dramatically destroyed for blaspheming. So when people do these types of things, it's an attempt to offend on purpose, to draw attention to the reactions that take place and what threats are being made surrounding those activities, and that those activities should never, if you draw the Prophet Muhammad or you draw a sexualized Hindu goddess, that even though you may think it distasteful, even though it's not something that I would do personally, but I understand the motivations behind it. The motivations behind it are a sign of solidarity with the people who, if they did do that, would lose their freedom or their lives, to bring attention to it so that more people are aware that that is the case and how ridiculous it is. And that even though you may find it distasteful, not like that person, not want to be around that person should never be subject to prosecution or death threats as a result. And sometimes the only way to get a lot of attention around a subject matter like this is to really get people riled up. So some people do that as a form of activism in order to prove the point that people are getting riled up and that they do get death threats and that that's unacceptable.
And I don't know if you're familiar with my work, Joe.
I guess go ahead.
I don't know if you're familiar with my work, Joe, but I'm a former Christian, and most of the really important people in my lives, most of my friends for most of my life, and a lot of my family members, they are all still Christians. And so when I do my activism work, I very much try to speak to the Christian that I was. So I don't use foul language, for example. And there's lots of things that I try to do to make myself palpable to Christians so that they will listen to what I want to say. And I think this would go across other religions. However, if I'm honest with myself about my own deconversion, parts of it were listening to arguments, but parts of it, just as Shannon said, was when I heard George Carlin or people saying things about Christianity that shocked and offended me, I was forced then to think about, why am I shocked and offended, and should I be? And different people come to different decisions based on various things. It's always some combination of ideas and emotions. And to say that that no one should ever try to talk about or utilize those emotional tools, of which mockery is one, that is very short-sighted and may well mean that we're not reaching some of the people that we want to reach with our message. Would you disagree with that?
So I see where you guys are kind of coming from. I do want to make a bit of a distinction, I guess, between blasphemy, because one thing that you mentioned and also Shannon mentioned is the idea that this notion that by blaspheming, you're going to lose your freedoms in certain parts of the world. And mockery is like a way to assert that, that freedom. I can kind of see maybe where you're coming from, but I just tend to disagree with some behaviors, if I can just mention that. By the way, my connection's a little weak. So if I just abruptly hang up, it's probably just because of my Wi-Fi. So if that actually happens by accident, like, I apologize.
Okay. You understand.
Hang up or rage quit. Okay. So one thing that so in certain parts of the world, I'll give an example, like Saudi Arabia, for example, because I do come from a Muslim background. If, for example, you are caught not praying the 5 prayers in certain communities, or you are caught not doing certain things, then you can be jailed for blasphemy. Or if you express something, maybe even in the 17th century or 16th century, when people believed that the earth was flat, and you said that the earth was round, you could be charged for blasphemy. So those things, I understand that blaspheming in that way is you can be prosecuted for that. But I guess what I don't understand is even drawing Prophet Muhammad or the sexualized Hindu images. It's doesn't that I just don't see the point of that, right? It's just that doesn't that kind of hurt the atheist cause? It repels religious people away from the, atheist religious, discourse, which is something I'm a big fan of, by the way. It's I am a Muslim, but one thing about me is that I don't like being in an echo chamber, which is what a lot of religious communities are kind of in. I want to talk to other people, including atheists and quote unquote, people from other faiths, unbelievers. That's what they say in my community sometimes. So doesn't that kind of turn people away from the discourse, or make religious people not want to talk to or have that open conversation that we want,
Oh, I'm going to do something that may surprise you and agree with you a little bit. Okay. So you may have heard me say initially it's not something that I would do. And one of the reasons that it's not something that I would do is because I enjoy engaging in these types of conversations, and I want people to feel open to approach me, right? I want them to know that I'm interested in hearing what they believe and expressing to them why I believe what I believe, and having, intelligent conversations about science and philosophy and theology, and helping to expand my mind and maybe contribute to the public discourse, right? So I understand that I take a specific posture in order for that to be something that people are willing to want to do with me. And I also recognize that if I engage in the behavior that you just mentioned, then it's going to send a message that I am, I'm not approachable. I'm more interested in mocking you, right? I understand that. But what you maybe don't understand is, or are conflating, is that you see perhaps atheists or atheist activism as this sort of monolith. And I don't think that's the case. So those, I've stated my goals. The people that are doing these other types of things, they have a subset of goals. Now, I understand that you're looping them in. So you're saying, well, they're atheists and activists, and you're atheist and you're an activist. So essentially you're the same kind of person. So if they engage in this behavior, I'm going to ascribe it to people like you. I'm going to assume maybe the same sort of motivations, and I'm going to assume that maybe people like you don't want to have conversations with me. I understand that, but also a good friend of mine is actually, I'm going to get emotional. A good friend of mine is in Tanzania right now and is under arrest for Trump. Her name is Zara, for trumped up charges because she went home to visit her family, and she's an ex-Muslim activist, and they called her in for blasphemy, and it ended up trumping up a couple of charges and took her passport and won't let her go home now, and she may have to go to jail because she's an activist.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
So
I'm so sorry to hear that.
We have a specific set of privileges here, right? Where we can prioritize conversations. I have the privilege to be able to prioritize having conversations as my goal. There are people who don't have that privilege. They're trying to prioritize freedom for the people that they love and for themselves. They're trying to prioritize an end to persecution for people that they know are being killed and jailed in places because these types of things aren't allowed. And sometimes the only way to draw attention to them is to do them. Because if you sweep them under the rug, you can't see the reactions and you can't see the results. So they need to do it so that you can see the reactions and the results, so that people like us can recognize that we have a privileged perspective right now by making conversations a priority. Like, I know that my friend Zara would love to be able to have conversations about intellectual dialogues be her priority. But right now, she's trying to get home and they took her passport because she's an ex-Muslim who speaks about it publicly. So I find it very, very privileged for us to have these conversations as though doing something like this shuts down the atheist community, and that particular type of activism shines poorly on me is what I'm seeing, or people like me, and that I should maybe, I don't know, keep my community in check or whatever. You have to focus on why that's the case. If it's offending you to see it, think about how offensive it would be to be in jail because you did it. That's the point that they're trying to make. And it matters because it happens. And I have a friend it's happening to. So, sorry.
No, of course. Again, I just want to preface by saying I'm really sorry that this happened to your friend. Even as like a Muslim, I would like oppose blasphemy laws. I don't think anybody should be jailed for expressing whatever religious affiliation or lack of. So I'm sorry that this happened to your friend. I really am. And no, you are right. Like in North America, we have the freedom to express any of our thoughts and emotions without being jailed for them. So I definitely can see that. I guess it was kind of like where I was kind of coming from was more just that the idea of just like mocking certain like beliefs for the shock value, it seems like. So
it's not for the shock. It might seem like that to you, but they'll stop drawing the pictures when you stop killing us and putting us in jail.
Well, but Shannon, you mentioned about the monolith, right? That sometimes I may think you guys are a monolith. And okay, if that's a very valid point, maybe that's something I didn't consider. I can't just paint all atheists under one brush. I think it's just something I've noticed that. But then again, Shannon, I'm just saying this in the most respectful way. Isn't you just saying when you'll stop when I stop killing you guys? Kind of the same.
Oh my, you know what? You're absolutely right. And I owe you an apology for saying that. I meant you, and I just did the same thing that you did. You're absolutely right. I owe you an apology. I'm in an emotional state and I shouldn't have said that. I should have said they and taken it away from you because this isn't your fault. So I'm so sorry if I made you feel that way. And I do owe you an apology. So I'm sorry.
I appreciate that. And yeah, of course, I understand. I'm really sorry that, again, something like this really did happen to your friend. I guess the thing is because I've been in religious communities and I've seen some of the more extreme sides where they vilify anyone who's like a disbeliever. And I'm talking about like religious, like communities that are in that like state. I'm not saying that this is all religious communities or even almost religious Muslim communities. That's not what I mean. So basically I've seen like more on the extreme side of people just vilifying unbelievers and especially atheists because they conflate atheists with, they're, like the devil has them and they're just trying to drag you to hell with the rest of the unbelievers. So like, I think that's nonsense. But on the other hand, it's just that when I see atheists, like, like some atheists, I shouldn't conflate, again, all atheists.
Hashtag not all atheists.
Sorry, like when I see some atheists like maybe drawing like deliberate pictures of like Muhammad or deliberate pictures of like the Hindu gods or like having sex or something like that. Or and I don't know if this is a good analogy, but even some people drawing swastikas on like Jewish books. Isn't that kind of the opposite? Like the other extreme? It's just that's kind of where I was thinking about. Because I want discourse, right? I love, like, as a Muslim, I love talking with you guys. I watch your show quite a bit. I may not always agree with every single thing that you guys say, but I love the discourse. And it's just that I feel with mocking certain religions just for the sake of mocking religions instead of focusing more on, that activism, that repelling the blasphemy laws or making sure that atheists have a safe space to voice their atheism or people aren't persecuted for their lack of faith. Isn't that kind of where we should prioritize, which I would support as a religious person?
So I'm with you. I understand what you're saying. I really, really understand what you're saying. And not everybody has the same goals. I'm all about your actions aligning with your goals, right? So my goal is, like I said, more open and honest discourse, and to be able to be approached and hear people and feel heard by people and have them feel heard by me. So I'm going to enact different behaviors as a result. If somebody else's goal is to draw attention to these types of laws by essentially breaking them to prove the point that they should be trivial and they shouldn't result in what they result in, I can understand that too. It's not necessarily a behavior that I would engage in because I have different goals. Now, you have different goals as well. You have goals that are similar to mine, it sounds like. So you probably wouldn't wander around saying crappy stuff about atheists. But there are theists, there are Muslims, there are Christians, there are Hindus that do those things, right? So those are the people that I would, if I'm interested in discourse and dialogue, and they don't comport to the way that I want to engage, I just wouldn't engage with them. I wouldn't attempt to call another atheist and say, hey, shouldn't you get these guys under control or publicly chastise them? Because it does take all kinds in activism. It's I nor you could stand up in with any authority and say, we know the way to be an activist. There is this way to be an activist, and any other way that you are an activist doesn't comport to the way that I feel is best. Because if there's anything that I think reality demonstrates, is that it takes all kinds of approaches because everybody's motivated by, understands, or is affected by a different type of behavior. So just doing my approach is potentially not going to reach the people that somebody who does a more sort of salacious approach does in order to get a reaction. That may get more eyes than what I do. Look at my channel. I've only got 26,000 subscribers. I don't do clickbaity stuff, right? If I did clickbaity stuff, more people would probably come into my channel, but that's not what motivates me. So I make different choices. Is that necessarily a smart choice? Maybe I should. Maybe I'd get more eyes in front of me so that I could deliver the message. Maybe that's their motivation, is that they know more people are going to see it and come, and then they can hear the actual message afterwards. We just don't know. So I got a little bit emotional, and I apologize because it's something that's personally affected me this past week. So I apologize for that entering into the conversation, but I don't know how it couldn't based on the conversation, just because it is my reality right now. I again owe you an apology for ascribing fault for what's happening to Zara and people like her to you. I did not mean to do that. It was a slip of the tongue. So I hope that this benefits. I feel like we could go in circle for a long time, and we are pretty much at the close of the show, so I'm going to have to let you go. And thank you for calling, Joe. I feel like this was a fruitful conversation, and it's one I'll listen back to because there's probably things I can learn about listening to you with more open ears and less emotional ones. Okay? Sure. And yay, Canada. Go Team Canada.
Please, Shannon, no need to apologize for getting emotional.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You know us. We like to say sorry.
You don't apologize.
Thank you. All right. Well, we did it, Paul. We did it.
Wow. We did it.
8 p.m. or 7 p.m. or 6 p.m., depending on where in the world you are. How did you feel about your second AXP and you being the first co-host of the new year and the first Canadian invasion?
This was a lot of fun. I hope chance to do it again. But Canada should take over everything, right? That's the way that should.
I've been saying that for years. Yep. Nobody will listen to me. Maybe today's the day. Mm-hmm. Well, but just in case anybody tuned in late and they're not familiar, why don't we'll throw up your card and you can tell everybody who you are and where they can find you.
Sure. I'm Paul from Paulogia. You can see the spelling of my channel there. I am a former Christian who looks at the claims of Christians in the realms of science and theology and in news. And if any of those things interest you, particularly in counter apologetics, you might find something to enjoy on my channel.
Awesome. And just a quick reminder before we do sign off that all of the donations until the 10th of January will go to Black non-believers, and the ACA will match 1-to-1 up to $10,000. Help us hit our goal, guys. We really want to support this organization. And also, can we get a big hand for our crew and our moderators who are keeping up with our foolishness nonstop all day, every day? Thank you, guys. You guys are always so amazing. Thank you for welcoming me as a part of the community. I'm happy to count myself amongst the volunteers now. So I appreciate all of you guys. You deserve all of the love. And welcome to 2021, guys. Help elevate the discourse. Bye.
What will it take for you to start?